Hello, everybody, and welcome to part 2, working on the Queen of Onslaught. And what you see in my hand here, this is really what we're going to lock in. I think pretty much the entire episode will be spent on this. Maybe we fool around a little bit with the base, but really this is going to be our main focus. And there's decisions to make. So we did say that metal was going to be metal with reflections. We said that these were going to have their own interior glow. This would also be something else besides molten, some kind of molten surface. Same thing goes with the skulls here. Then we did this on the head. We still have to actually do that on the back over here. We've got to figure out exactly what's going to happen with the hair. But then we've got to figure out what's going on with this too. Are we going to do this on all of this skin? It's tempting to do so. It's real tempting. I'm thinking, you see what we got happening down here? I think that even on her cheeks, maybe. See, we'll do a lighter version of that on her cheeks. And I think we'll do where we've got this is where the airbrush said it's darker, right? And especially maybe out towards the extremities, right? Makes sense. Makes sense. So I think we will play first and foremost. This is gonna be what we're gonna dive into first here is just see what happens with this pattern. How much do we enforce that? Now it doesn't have to necessarily be adding this lighter stuff. It could just be adding darker bits here. So I'm thinking here we don't want this much attention right here. It doesn't make any sense. There's really no point to that. Here is where we want all the action to be anyway. Even here we're going to have to figure out what's going on. We will continue obviously with our fluorescent paints here. The yellow and the orange. I will most certainly be using some of our contrast paints here to mix in with those, and then obviously some of the lighter right here like this. And of course, we've been using these all along, so we'll continue with these guys too. We'll get those guys out on the palette, and as I said, we've got some big time decisions to make here, and there's going to be a little more detail. So we're pulled in closer here. I think we're going to do some more that just have everything pulled in tight and see what we can do, if possible, to some smoothing out of this stuff here, because remember all we were looking to do was just lay that stuff out. Now we got to refine that too, in addition to all the skin stuff here. So let's get that paint out on the palette and let's do this thing next. So I think to give you a little taste of what I meant, I am going to take some of this right here. Maybe a little, yeah, let's keep some of that orange effect here. Now, do you recognize these, right? Well, I want to say your discount Sable 000. Again, these have really been troopers. They have taken so much abuse and yet just dealt with it fantastic. So what's happening here? What are we doing here? Finding ourselves a bit of darker tones. And by darker, that's relative. That's all relative. This is actually really do. I sort of like this color right here. Now, this is what I mean about being able to establish, see, some of this here, but it's nowhere near as dark as what we've got up on top of her head here. So it still sort of conveys we don't want her to look like she's got, oh, I don't know, some kind of disease here. I'm also going to work some of this more orange color up in here, because remember, this was all just about, look at that. It's all about establishing those colors quickly, very quickly. Can go back in here now and start to address things in a more relaxed fashion. Let's do a bit of the, get some of those over here. Oh, let's get the other side of her face, and then let's maybe go around and do her hair. So let's focus on the face here first. Why not? Why not? Because this will going to dictate everything else. Now I might just do a little bit of this on some parts of the skin tone here. And by a little bit, I'm just talking like this. Just like this here. It's as subtle as I can get it. Remember, we have at least 2 translucent colors in here. Yes, we have the burnt sienna, but we also have the fluorescent orange and some of our contrast paint in there too. So also got to remember, have to remember to vary the size of these things. If they're all the same size, or if they're too uniform, you're just going to, you will lose a lot of your effect. That's about the only way I can say it. It's going to look more like leopard spots or something more organized instead of cracked lava, much more random. And generally, you have your larger segments scattered around the smaller segments. I think that starts to, now you're starting to get the idea here of how this is going to work. We are going to go a bit darker on the other side here. We got our wildwood. We'll mix it with our red, and I want to make sure that these sort of carry over where possible. So I'm just kind of bouncing back and forth here. I know it's kind of dizzying here to see this go back and forth, but it's sort of necessary. So I'm going to say this carries over here to, and I think that's good enough there. Now, let's go back to our lighter stuff here. A little bit of that fluorescent yellow that just keeps it from becoming too pink. You don't want it to be too pink. Now this is another area where this brush doesn't do quite so well as, say, I need to get a little more opacity into that, as the synthetic brushes would say. How that's puffing out like that. You wouldn't quite get so much of that with the synthetics. You can also see how it's kind of deforming here, so I might just have to ditch this brush here. So yeah, that's just getting irritating, so that goes away. Now we're going to go with something that's more along the lines of a synthetic here. So here's our Cotman. This is a 00. I haven't actually used this one before, so it might have a hair out of place or something. But look at that. See how sharp that is, and watch what's going to happen. The weird thing is that the other brush would be better for doing the darker elements here. Just is what it is. See how that brush doesn't balloon? It doesn't look like it's a water balloon or something like that, or a sponge that just collected a whole bunch of water. See, this is where it's going to be one big, larger crack there. We want these to be lighter. Get the yellow in here. just real quick, just to good enough. I just had to indicate that before I forgot all about it. Because if you remember, on the other side, in some ways, these little cracks like this were generated sort of from the whatever this is. I don't really know. Like, again, I'm not in the development of these miniatures or anything like that, so I don't quite know exactly what some of the intention was. Sometimes I do get to find out a little bit of the history of them and what the idea was story wise behind some of the designs. This one's a wee bit on the new side, as in, like, you haven't seen this yet. I've got to decide. Do we? Nope. This is gonna just have to be larger. I was gonna do a smaller one there. No, I'm gonna have to. I will have to make that smaller. Oh well. Then I'll just make the gap in that a little larger too. So this one larger here. Okay. Flip it around. Again, fluorescent yellow to make sure that does not get too pinkish. Don't want pink. But what we do want is to see what happens with a. Okay, the eyes are lighter. And I will most certainly take some of the fluorescent orange and then knock some of this down that I'm putting in right here. Can you see that? I think so. I think you can. Where are we at? Here we are. Gonna go maybe back in and find just see a couple of. It's not the whole thing. It's not a solid line. But remember, we took our orange and went over the top of that. I just as much as I like this lighter stuff here, you'll definitely have to be toned down. And I'm almost better off indicating some of these islands of lava, if whatever you want to call them, by going with the darker stuff there instead of these little lighter cracks and fissures, such things. Yeah, I can go with a smaller brush too, so maybe we'll do that at a certain point as well. See what can happen here. Let's a little orange in there again. And how much of this are we going to do? So again, see how that brush does not lose its, the tip just kind of stays there. It doesn't flex. That is the benefit of having the synthetic bristol there. It's also, well, it's still considered a spotter. It's a 111, but it's more like a 1.5111. It's closer, I would say, in many ways to that true 222 liner brush. And you can see some of our underlying color here is light enough so that doesn't really show up that much, but it does. See, in a couple of patches here, it's just like what we did up on the top of her head. In a few areas, it shows up. Not everywhere, not everywhere, but a couple places like this. Then it sort of continues out here. We've got a little piece of metal there. And then I think we're going to go with, yeah, we'll do the cracks over this too. Okay, we've got one there. Let's break this up into several smaller pieces. We'll do our orange glaze over that, just like we did on these areas here. But I think we are definitely, yeah, we're replicating that pretty nice up here. I also have to vary that line width. It doesn't always have to be thin. Some of the fissure can be a little bit more of a little more dramatic there too. So it's, again, we're trying to almost bring you from a more molten state here to maybe something that is more of a cold state. It's all very much fantasy. So as much as realism is sort of part of the goal here, it's you can only do so much. There's so much fantastical nature to this anyways. Again, some smaller pieces here. We'll get some lights in there. Again, sort of like that's what's generating. It's your heat source there. And complete this here. And for sure down here, remember the rest of all that is essentially metals. And I think now maybe when you see this, I know for the longest time I was telling you stuff and it's just like, well, okay, what the heck does that mean? What does that really mean? I think now that you actually can see this sort of just develop like this, now maybe, and it clearly, oh yeah, this would have not been advisable to do over the whole thing. It just wouldn't have made sense. It would have been too much of the same thing, as in like way too much of the same thing. That wouldn't have worked out at all. Wouldn't have worked out at all. Let's while I'm here, I mean, hey, let's just do it. We got the color. Let's take it and let's not forget about this stuff over here. Okay. Some more of this molten stuff where the skin is going to be. I won't emphasize this too much, right? That's good enough. Good enough. We will block out a few more of these. Remember, we will be taking those darker colors. Let's just go down here to the side of the leg here. As you do. Don't really care if those skulls are gonna get hit. Now you know I didn't really do too much more on those skulls because I knew I was gonna have to somehow delicately reach in there and do some of this. So that's why I just kind of let the skulls go. Can you see this? Yes, this is so one big. This is another way too to I kind of like forced perspective in a way by having these larger shapes here, just like we have these bigger shapes up here, obviously filled in with some of the smaller ones. But having these biggest shapes where you have the most open space, it sort of makes those, I don't know, they it translates a little better. I unfortunately don't have a more reasonable explanation for you other than that. We'll move this around to the back. Okay. Connect these dots here. We'll get ourselves another larger chunk over here like this. Okay, let's so I think what's going to happen is we will continue with this in the next thing, because there's going to be a lot of this to do. If I feel like it's getting to be a little too repetitive and you're not really seeing anything new, well, then I'll just do it at a off-camera bit. But look at that, nice little, yeah. So good. If that was also here, it would be too much. So much of the same thing. I mean, as I'm doing this and I see so much of it to do, I'm just really glad that I'm not there's doing any more, that there is that much armor stuff going on. Because at a certain point, you would really lose. Okay, while we have this here, I am going to. Remember, we talked about having the flames here as sort of a horizon line, maybe. So it's not. Yes, it's about doing the skin, but I see I've got a color already at hand here. I'm going to use that. I know that's not really the approach that a lot of painters use. It's just, this is all we're working on. We work on this and nothing else. Well, that's not what we do here. It's not what we do here. So I'm looking to get not just a bigger piece, but something that's a different type of shape. I don't want them to just be almost like they're little floating round pieces. And I tried to, and they're called tangents, and tangent basically something like a T shape. Yeah, I almost dropped into stained glass mode. That really wouldn't have been helpful because there's not really a whole lot of stained glass folks, I'm pretty sure, here in the Patreon. But I used to do stuff with stained glass. Mostly I would paint on those pieces, and sometimes I did actually design one stained glass window. It was based on a piece of art that I did. Actually, you can see it on the blog. Right there, see that scrolling across? Go check out wapeliusblogspot.com. Go to the 2D art section, and you'll see a series of paintings. And the middle painting in the series was actually, it was a painting, or a drawing anyway, that I developed into something that could be made into stained glass. And the idea was you could not have any shapes that had any kind of a T, because basically what that would do is that would put stress on the glass and the glass would shatter. It would basically create a fault line. Your pieces always had to flow a certain way, just like here. See how I changed that angle a little bit? It couldn't be a T shape. T shape was, and like this here, you couldn't have a shape like that, so you had to break it up like this. And you notice you have very little with the right angles. Everything basically on an angle. So, and back in here, we'll do a few of our lighter stuff here, but I really want to indicate that more with our darker patterns. This, okay, so that is, I'm just going to do this side here, or this leg, I guess. Again, to see if I feel like that's too much of a right angle, I'll just break it up with some smaller shapes. Just break it up with a few smaller areas there. because we won't just be doing these outlines here like this. We'll also, for sure, try to work in some of those darker shapes like we started with on the face. We'll start and get some of those in there too. It is a little bit tougher to do this with these straps over the top of this, so this will be a challenge, that's for sure. Get breaking this up into those smaller shapes, and sometimes I change the width of the line too. Work our way down here to this piece of armor, and then we've got a little bit on the calf here, probably some on the front of the leg, maybe, probably covered by the armor. So see here, less of this lighter stuff is going to make an impact, but certainly those darker tones will make a very big impact there. Now let's bring this all the way back here. Again, while I have this color here, I need these lights. I keep kind of forgetting about these. Also, the thing to remember about the fluorescent paint is, I don't want to say it can dry in your brush, but it can kind of, when it does sort of get dry, it sort of gums things up just a bit. And I'll do a couple of things here to close out the calf. And what we'll do is we'll start this back up again. We'll start to work our way around. There's just, I think, a little bit less on that side. We'll do this one arm here. Finish up with adding these kind of lighter patterns like this, and then add the darker stuff. We gotta do it on the back of the head too. There's plenty of places we need to do that. We're just getting started here anyways. All right, so I'm gonna get a couple of my lights there. Next up, we're gonna continue this over here onto the arm, onto this leg, and then we'll do some of the darker stuff like what we did here on the front, and we'll do that on these other surfaces too. And we'll be right back with that. Let's work on the face here. Now, what I might just do, yeah, I think I'm going to do that. I'm just going to stick it here on some other little platform so I can, I think, work on a little bit easier. I need to not be touching that here with my fingers. Hopefully this will be good enough. It may still fall off of here. That's just blue tack. That looks pretty hilarious. Okay, let's go in here with some of those darker tones. So we're good. We got the mahogany here and our burnt sienna. We'll dive in here. Look at how dark that is even. And that doesn't even have any of the wildwood in it. Wow, big old difference here. Still working with that 00. To me, it's more of a liner brush than a spotter brush, but it's, according to the numbers, it's a spotter brush. But see the difference that this already makes here. And remember, we're trying to divide up some of these units into smaller units too, like you see here. Over here. Then we've got to figure out what is going on with that here. Are we just going to start to go right over the top of this? Take some of the mahogany here. I don't want to wipe out all of the glow to this. So just go along these edges here. Even now, that's making a big difference. Big difference here. So continue with the mahogany, I think. It starts to make our, well, again, if you want to have dark, you must have light, and it goes the other way too. Because if you don't, you can make things as dark as you want, or as light as you want, but if you don't have any kind of dark next to it, that light is just not going to be happening. So here we are with a nice little addition of this. Now we've got the wildwood mixed with that mahogany. I like it because it does sort of thin out the mahogany enough. It's not like it's a glaze level thinning, but see, it makes it a little bit enough translucency. Yeah, see, just like what we've got over on this side here. I'm going to change this around, and I'm going to make that just one big old shape there. I just looked at the other side and said, you know what, I need one large dominant shape over on this side, like we've got over here. Like I said, I'm prone to changing things. We'll make changes to that plan. Have to be willing to do that. See if I can go one closer for you here. There we go. That's why I wanted to also have this thing not be on the figure. I thought that could be helpful for you, seeing a little bit closer. And remember, we also have to go in and do some, we'll tone down some of the yellow, but just like we did here. That makes a big difference. We've got to figure out what is going to happen here. This part of the face. If I want to have that sort of interior glow, we've got to darken some of these down as well. Let's get some darks over here. I really couldn't do this very much. It was just too close to, way too close to where the armor was. I'm really curious to see what the face looks like once we get these nice darks in here. Again, I don't want those to be looking almost more like she's got some kind of measles or whatever, so I'm trying to get a little bit of a dark there on the upper eyelid. And now touch darker on that face in some areas here, keeping these from getting too large. Yeah, that's starting to me, that's starting to create the molten effect on the face. Let's get our, it's not just orange, a little touch of the Blood Angels red in there too. Because it makes a nice little glaze, not just over these lighter portions, but even over the darker portions as well. I'll do this on the back here before we forget. So that starts to, because here, if you want it to be further away from the original source, that just, we have to darken down that. And now this will be more of a source of light here. And the other thing that's happening too that I'm gonna be fighting against is because it's been in the 90s here for days and days. The house is so hot, and I know you can probably hear the sound of all those fans going in the background. I apologize for that. That's well, it's either have all the computers turned off because it's too hot in the house, or have some fans going. So those are the choices. The choice is now obvious. We'll just have to live with the sound of the fans. The other consequence of the fans, and I know this because I've had other people telling me that their pallets are even their wet pallets are drying out like crazy. Now there is a solution, and it's ironic that we're talking about very warm things while painting this, basically a magma demon here. Is these they basically work? I think you sort of put ice into. They're small. There's little small units designed to just for a room, just for a room. I think you throw some ice in there, and the idea is that the your breeze blows on the ice, and that puts out some not just cooler air, but actually air that has a little bit of humidity to it. And a few people I know have actually gotten those after I told them about them, and they said they have been effective. The big thing is they're also supposed to be quiet. That's another big deal. And I've got one of those coming this way. It's going to not arrive for a couple more days yet, so I wish I could give that a test right now. I've been trying to do the best I can, taking big jugs of ice and putting them in front of fans to help the air conditioners. But that is if you live in a very warm area. Heck, I might even put the link for you in the description. It would be appropriate, wouldn't it? So don't be surprised if you see an Amazon link to some of these cooling fans. Again, the idea is that they're small, they take care of a room, but they are quiet. So the idea was I would not have to have all of these fans going here, and it would be quieter, and it wouldn't be drying out my palette because it's basically after 5 minutes I'm getting a skin to develop on my paint, which is not super helpful. Another reason, well, there are so many reasons to prefer oils over acrylic paint. They're far too numerous to list here, but not really having to worry about such things, fans, humidity, and all that. That's another little plus on the ledger for the oil paints. Another little plus for those. And we're just gonna go over here, and this is our sienna and orange mix. And as much as I like that being a light source, I want to get just a hint of these darker shapes. So I'm going to take the orange with the burnt sienna here. Break this up a little bit. I'm going to go even more with the orange. I think you can see what's happening here as these shapes start to dissipate a little bit, not quite so noticeable there, but not there. I think we'll make that one a little lighter too. And I see we've got to... That's a little bit thicker than I thought it was, that particular shape. Okay. I think we're starting to get there on the face. Let's get a smaller brush in here. I'm going to go, I've got let's try out a new quad 0 here. Same 111, just a couple more zeros on it. Couple more zeros. But it's also going to let me get some more efficient darks in here, more precision. I will take some of my latest color here. I'm kind of missing out on some of my. Oh, geez, that's all dry already. Wow, that is that's pretty wild. That is already dry. I might have to actually turn down the brightness on the camera because this is. By speaking of brightness, wow, look at that. I'm actually going to take some of that's my off white in there just to really intensify that. You can't even see it. It's probably not even showing up on the camera at all. It is that bright. So let's drop that brightness down a touch. I think that's a little bit better for you. You can see these two sides, they're not they are not, what would you say, symmetrical. They're asymmetrical. I just noticed that because I'm looking at this going, I'm actually basically trying to paint them as symmetrical, and they are not. So I just realized that. I just happened to realize that now. And yes, we'll get to the all that other stuff, finishing off the, what would you say, the lava cracks and everything on the body as well. We'll do that in the next segment. I want to have this. I want to have the face all settled here as much as possible. I guess what I'd like to be able to do is glue the head onto there because I think it's going to make a big difference when we put some of the other pieces on. So that's another goal here, is to be able to actually attach this thing by the end of this episode here. All right. I'm going to analyze this. Do I have to make these cracks even brighter here, or do I have to tone them down? I'm going back and forth on that. I was just about to tone them down, and then I thought, well, maybe I got to go the opposite way here, because I really would prefer to do that than to get even more like these darks all the way down here on the face. I'd rather do something like this instead to break those shapes up, and I think that was a good choice. I think that was. I also now have to. There's a little eternal. Well, debates are all eternal, but a little internal debate here about should some of that be up here too, or will it just mess around too much with the shapes of the, well, her frowny face here, I guess. Let's get a little orange into this here. What about the nostrils? What about the end of this nose? I'm doing that just to sort of indicate the object source lighting. I'm not super convinced that I'm gonna stay with that, but I'm also going to darken down some of the skin here that's over the nose. We got some of our burnt sienna. This gonna be a delicate balance here. I don't want to go too dark with this. I think that is about the right balance for that. Yeah, that's gonna work. How's about this? Also trying to do some smoother areas here. I'm gonna make sure I've got focus for this. Just 1 second there. I guess that is. Seems to be. Now that I've got my smallest brush here, let's see what's going to happen with some of the floating lava shapes. A couple of smaller ones now. I may just actually need to have some of these get out to the chin here. Might just need to do that. This stuff that's right here, actually, it's make it a little bit more challenging to continue that effect. So sometimes an effect that kind of works really well in one part of the sculpt, there's another part just the way it is, the really close by part that makes it go doesn't work so well. So it's like it giveth and taketh away. I think that orange that I just added there, that was a bit helpful. Yeah, I'd almost kind of wish it that these little, I don't know, kind of like flowery tendril type things, that it would be easier to do what I wanted to do if those weren't there. Now, of course, if this is mine and mine alone, well, maybe I just file those off or sculpt something different there. I mean, you could certainly do that with yours. When it's something like this, and basically it has to be the original figure with no alterations, well, you do what you can. Do what you can. Thin this down again. I was tempted to have one of these little cracks kind of go over the nose, but I don't want it to look like she has a broken nose, like she's wearing one of those band-aids over the top of her nose. So we'll abandon that idea. That was one of those ideas that went away as quickly as it came in, saying, nope, that's not going to work. I don't think we want to be doing that. We can go to the side of the nose and then stop there. That's okay. I'm just going to go directly to the mahogany over here to get this. May not, as far as a lava effect, maybe not, but to just make these eyes show up, I've got to do that. That to me makes a big difference here. Can you see the other one now? Yeah. Again, I was trying to maybe not do that, but to me, this situation just called for it. I didn't want to line the eyes. I was hoping not to have to do that, but I really do want those to just jump out at you. And I can only make things so light. And who knows, maybe even that, as I'm going to add a little bit of the wildwood to that and go maybe even a little darker. There. There. Maybe even on the lips there. Yep. That. I think now, okay, that's starting to really translate. It was getting a little bit too light. We're also going to have the dark of the nose move down further. We're going to get some more darks in here. As much as I was hoping to do more with some middle tones and some bright, lighter colors, I think I need to go the way of some darker tones. Up here, to oh my goodness, yes, we will take at least some of the mahogany combined with the burnt sienna and just darken that down. Again, I liked the idea of having those additional shapes in there, that sort of cracked lava look. But even as I'm looking at this close, right, and it wasn't translating. Now you take this and you put it on that entire figure with all the other stuff that's going on. And to me, that says it's going to translate even less. And that's what I'm really worried about. Or read. It's not going to read the way I want it to. And for folks that have done freehand or something like that, where it looked fantastic on paper, it looked fantastic large, then you get it on the figure itself, and all of a sudden you say, whoa, wait a minute. That looked fantastic on a small piece of paper or large on a piece of paper or on a flat piece of paper. But then it got it on a figure where there's other stuff going on and it's round or it's folding around a cloak, and you say, oh, well, that didn't work as well as I wanted it to. And I guess don't be dismayed by that, because those things can most certainly happen. I think if you're more aware of that from the start, it's less likely to sneak up on you and happen. You have to always think, you know what? This looks great to me. That's the idea is fantastic. Will it work? Is it practical on the actual figure itself? So see, this I think is starting to help. It's starting to work. I am going to, however, take some of my yellow and orange, and even here go after some. As much as I like that white hot stuff, sometimes it's weird. I tone it down, and I end up liking the toned down stuff better. I'm also gonna chuck in a little bit of the orange there. Maybe the chin needs some. Maybe it really does. This is the last. Yeah, you know what? It did. It did. I didn't. That was something I was trying not to have to do, but it really did work. So now I'm going to say we've got the face pretty well set. There might be some other things that I do after the fact here when I've got some more light on it, or I notice more things. Yeah, it needed that. As much as I like that under lighting and stuff, it still has it. It still has some of that effect going on, but I think that makes more sense. So now, okay, this is what I told you was going to happen in this segment. What we're actually going to do now is we'll dive in to the rest of the kind of skin tones and such. Where is it here? So we'll finish off this stuff, and a lot of the stuff we did here, we are going to do on the overall area of the skin here, and we'll be right back with that. Let's do the rest of this section here, and it's going to, we'll just do the arm, and we'll do this. I don't want to spend too long on it because we've got a lot of the darker stuff to do. This will be significantly easier than the face, for sure, because we got these much broader surfaces. We don't have to worry about, well, yeah, does that left cheek or right cheek not really, does it really not look like a cheek because, well, there's too much stuff going on? No, that's a little bit different. So you can see different pattern there. Let's see what we can do on the arm here. Actually, just gonna get rid of some of the extra color here. They're just kind of, I'm practically wiping it away by using it. That's a interesting way to, there we go, get rid of extra color there by using it. Why not? The one thing I will say, when you start to combine the regular paints and the fluorescents together, sometimes they will get a, I don't want to say gummy, but it just, You'll see when you use it. I'll let you find out for yourself. Now, believe it or not, the these are very thin. The what was that? The Vallejo fluorescents that I used to use them all the time. I'd still use them if I had to use them. If I didn't have the golden acrylics, I'd still use the Vallejos. But those, oh my gosh, if you look at some of the older videos using them, and there are plenty of them. There's plenty of videos where I'm using the old Vallejo, well, not old, but the Vallejo fluorescents. And wow, those were super thick, and I mean like massively thick, hugely thick. So these, by comparison, that's why I like working with them. That's what makes them a little bit easier to deal with. Now here, where we've got the elbow, I do have to break this up into small enough pieces so that in effect it kind of wraps around the elbow. I know it sounds weird, but it's sort of like on the legs and such, where those larger open areas needed bigger, basically bigger pieces of this, for lack of a better term. Even the hand could get a little bit interesting here. Let's break this out. Look, we got basically almost like three pieces that are the same size. That's no good. That's no good. So we break that up. I also am going to use a little bit of this right here where we've got some of the jewelry of some sort. The hand here again. We'll think about some smaller pieces and maybe not so much with the brightest lava effect out there. We'll just do our last little bits in here. And we will call it a day. Now, once again, to our, I almost called it burgundy, to our burnt sienna, mahogany, touch orange. That little bit of orange doesn't really lighten it up. It will make it a little more translucent, and it's also thinning it down. So instead of water, I'm basically using paint to thin it down instead of water. So let's start to work in here. And you will see, look, we can see how we can introduce some smaller pieces that we didn't draw those in. We're painting those in now, but I know it kind of sounds like, wait a minute, what's the difference? But I can do smaller things here with these little dots, essentially having pieces of well, in effect, lava just floating there, just like we're doing over here. So this is an area where the airbrush, see that it kind of gave us some muddiness there. We will basically unmuddy that this way. And this is it's still a much lighter version of, we'll be doing some darker stuff here too. Let's see, let's see those little dots in there. That starts to, I like that. Once again, easier to do that here than say on the face because you don't have to worry so much. It's like the leg is the leg, the elbow is an elbow, arm's an arm, knee's a knee. But when you've got the face like that, and especially when there's supposed to be expression on it, I think it's easy to lose the shape of the face. And we don't want that to happen. We're really going to focus on actually this leg here. Can't see some of those. Allowed to just have little floating things. Maybe not quite as dark over here too. So see that? We make that a little bit lighter now. Back over here to our somewhat darker, and look at that. Now all of a sudden those metal colors, they start to, that's looking a little bit brighter now. So we'll get some contrast with that. Now we're going to work our way over this way, and oh, look at that. We have some more. We're developing a little more contrast with that. Continue. Again, breaking some of these up into smaller, even smaller sections. Yep, let's do that. Let's do that here. So this will be important because it's also going to, look at what we got here. All of a sudden now, can you, you can see it. Okay, I was worried for a second you wouldn't actually be able to see what was going on here, but you can now. Just so that it doesn't get too light too quickly, I'll have this over here. So that's an area where all of the yellow, the lightest yellow in the world, wasn't really going to do anything there. Nowhere near as much as what that does. Nowhere near the effect that that's going to have. Now, start to think about our darker stuff. We've got our mahogany over here. It's still got some of the burnt sienna. Break these into some smaller shapes here. Got it watered down. Not so much that runs all over the place, but a little bit thinner. Look at this little spider web of cracks and such there. It at one point, or it cools things down in some areas, but then also by the same token makes stuff, or yeah, it makes the lava look even hotter in other areas because the stuff that is lighter is gonna just look that much lighter. I'm gonna go back now, back over here to the more orangey version of this. And as light as that looked on the palette, it sure is much darker here. So we're going to go even more towards the orange here. It's also more, there we go. See? And like we did in the other areas here, we'll alternate back and forth between sort of the mid-tone lava and the darker lava and whatever lava. Let's make that a larger piece. We'll get some of our orange in here. And I'm working from those are the yellow lines that I actually did put there a while back in the previous segment. These, right, these are going to be very important here. I'm so glad that I let the armor just be the armor. Wow. It didn't seem like an obvious choice, I'll tell you. It was by no means was that a slam dunk choice, at least at the time. I look back at it now, and I say, how in the world was I even thinking any other choice was going to work? That all of this could have the same lava cracks on it. It wouldn't, it would have completely fallen apart. Who knows? Maybe I would have started doing it and I would have realized, hopefully soon enough, that was a no bueno idea. Remember, don't be prisoner to the original plan. Have that plan, but do not be held prisoner by it. Plan is good until it just holds you hostage. Then that's not good. Like right here, as much as so, I've got to do one of two things. Either the armor's got to be darker. I'm gonna actually do that. I'm gonna go both on that. The armor needed to be darker no matter what. There, I was just getting kind of silly. As much as I like to have it lit from underneath, but then we still need to do some of this. But these won't be terribly dark either. They're just sort of translucent. They got a lot of the fluorescent orange in them. All right. Yeah, that is definitely, to me, that is what I was hoping. Now, remember, we still got to take the orange and go over the top of that. I'm definitely not going to have time to do that in this particular segment. However, I will have to be doing orange on these skulls, and maybe that's when I can tone that down also. I'm thinking that is probably the next thing I will tackle is some of these secondary elements, like the skulls there. Maybe start to think about the axes as well, or weapons. It's not super complex there as far as the weapons go and what I wanted to do with them. Basically, an interior glow, and then the outsides I would just add, well, sort of the same darks as like you see me doing here. So not really rocket science on those either. There's really not much rocket science involved in any of this. Maybe some logic. Yeah, hopefully, it seems like logic. Not quite sure. Again, some of these smaller dots, so much easier than trying to draw in these areas with those yellow lines. It would have been darn near impossible just the way I'm holding this here. A couple of these smaller ones, and back to some bigger dots. Also thinking about my metals there. You know what? That's just going to be bigger too. Let's go around this side, and we are going to then, I think, go in full on mahogany. Boy, that's going to be tough for you to see. Bear with me. Just bear with me. I think this needs to actually be kind of on the darker side here. Remember, we're also going to take the orange, and we will be toning this stuff down. Just also keep that in mind. So it looks more like that orange. That's what's going to be on this side here. It's just like we did on the face, the head, the whatever. Her antlers, her horns, whatever those were. So now we've come back around here to this area where we start to do a bit of darker. And hopefully we don't do too much dark on this. It could get too dark. If it does, whatever. We can always lighten it up again. We've done that already. Especially on the face, we did that. Remember? I'll get a few darker spots over there. Let's make some of these now a bit darker. Well, like I said, there will have to be more. There's just so many spots here. It would take, and actually you can't even see those. So we're not going to do more of those. I looked up there and there's a big old axe in the way. So we won't be doing those anymore. We'll focus now on some of these where there's not a big giant axe in the way. Oh, let's go back to our lighter stuff here. It's getting a little bit dark there. See, even that, too much dark. More of the orange there. Better. Go back around this way, and now mahogany and some of the wildwood. And let's go much darker here on some of these. And the idea is I will try to split that up too. See, I basically took that and kind of divided it into three. So even these larger, they're just not going to be one solid plate, one solid mass. They will be broken up into smaller subplates. Not quite sure if that's quite the term that's appropriate, but then it's a magma monster. And I also have to think too, and some of these when I do that sort of orangey glaze over. Look how those nifty little, see those small ones there. That's what really makes this. That's what really does make it. And I can still go darker than this. I'm not even at wildwood, and wildwood is certainly not black. It's dark brown. It looks so dark because of all of the lights that we've managed to accumulate here, fortunately. So going with the, trying to get some of these smaller dots in here, maybe even trying to toss in a few darks there. Gonna make that just a big shape there. I saw too much in the way of small little dainty shapes, I think. Structurally, want some larger ones too. Keeping in mind that a lot of what you see here that is that bright yellow, that is going to get hit with the orange, I think. So that's more like what we've got on this side over here. Again, we're going to get these larger piece and then some smaller ones that work their way off of that larger piece. Now where there's the elbow, that's an area where maybe things will get lost in translation. So do I break it up into more small shapes, or do I try to consolidate it more into something that is larger? Again, over here. Let's get some of our dark wildwood in that. Hopefully not too much. And we'll get some of these darkened up, same as we did on the arm there. And I'm going to be curious to see what the face looks like. Once we have all this together, I think then the face won't look so unusual. Because before, that was like the only part that had this. There were no other sections that had this effect. And I think that will make a big difference as I now start to trail out some of that here. Not all the way out there. If I do that too much, then it becomes leopard spots and it'll too much of it. But one can hope that we're still staying within. All right, let's back this off into some more of the mahogany here. I realize you can't see that too well because of the axe, but I need to do this here, so just bear with me. I know sometimes it can be frustrating. You can't see. Heck, I can remember being in art school and watching a painting demo, and from where I was standing, the person spent 2/3 of the time standing in front of the area I was trying to watch him paint. But unless I knocked over all the other people that were standing around me and just got them out of the way so that I could move there, that's I had to live with it. Oh, let's go back over here to the mahogany. What are we? Yeah, you can't see that, so there's no point. I was just about to start painting there, and I went, ooh, I bet you they can't even see that. That you can see this. That is back to your burnt sienna with the orange. Okay. I definitely want to tone some of this down. You should be able to see this. Maybe even a bit more with my orange here as we work our way. Yeah, okay. That's good. You can see that, just look at that suggestion there. It kind of gets lost there. However, over here, I'm thinking I want it actually to be darker right there because I want to bring out that light. I kind of have to look at this. I've made a change there. Was it ideal? It wasn't necessarily what I wanted to do, but it's something I had to do. All right, last little bit here, just last few minutes of this. Get some darks down here. So what I'm gonna do is I'll hit this in the areas that are just gonna be a little bit too hard to see. Remember, there's a lot more to do here. So I will finish off those areas. And I said, well, we'll go back. We'll fool around with some of the axes. We've done minimal amount there, and also if I can, some smoothing of the armor if there's enough time. Okay, this just gonna make that darker, even though again I ideally prefer that to be lighter, but if the armor is going to translate, oh, and us also do some of our orange. And what do I mean by it's this? Right? Just the orange glaze over some of the brighter parts of the lava effect. I'm gonna get some, yeah, like right here. See that? That's needed in there. And all of a sudden, by this being darker, that armor piece shows up more. So, yeah, same thing. Yeah, look at that. Look at the difference that just, wow. Okay. I hope that this goes beyond just this particular figure. I try to make everything, I guess, a little bit more than just the particular thing we're painting at the time, so that it helps you with other projects in the future instead of just this particular thing. Because what if you never ever paint this thing? What if you're painting in one of the other demons and you want it to look like this? But yet you have to make a lot of these same choices and decisions. And hopefully this helps you do that. So let's move on along then. Let's not just dilly dally here. Let's proceed to other surfaces like those axes and weapons and smoothing the armor. There, look at that. Very nice texture there. So we'll be right back in just a second. This segment, I wanted to focus mostly on the skulls and the axes, see what's going on there. And the idea is the skulls would be done a bit like what we did here. See the glow that's hitting the back of them? I think we'll do the same here too. I also want to figure out what is happening with the axe set here. As much as I like got that brightness going on there, do we... See, I don't want to break it up to the point where it's got the same effect as the skin. I was just about to do that, and then I thought, maybe that's not quite the way to go. I see I've got to get some burnt sienna, not burnt sienna. Oh, it is burnt sienna. Never mind. Don't mind me. But one of the things we were doing with the skulls, if you recall from early on, we were taking some of the gray there. We'll mix it with a little bit of the yellow here. That's going to give us the hint of greenish gray to this. Essentially making it a little bit more neutral, a little bit cooler. And I like the idea of having this dark first and then working the light around that too. The axes here, I think, on some of these handles, and then some of the metals and such. Those little chain type of deals there. I'm thinking this is another place where some of this grayish tone could work well. Even here, this part of the handle. Let's go over here. Get some of the excess off of this, and there we are. Down here too. Some of these skulls back here. We'll obviously hit these with some lighter tones as well. Just wanted to establish this sort of grayish green here. I'll even do a touch of that on the, I guess, a robe, whatever that is, whatever item of clothing that just happens to be. What is going to happen here? Okay, I'm just gonna hit this and then take some away. I think that's probably my best approach on that. We'll just get that darker. And we're also gonna let some of, see how that grayish green goes down into the crevices here. That is automatically just gonna warm up this area here too. Make it just stand out a little more. And then I won't have to necessarily struggle to add so much of the fluorescent yellow, fluorescent orange. Yeah, just a little bit of background there. I even like the idea of having some of this in here. Remember, if I'm working with a color and I think, you know what, that could work in this area, that area, I'm going to go ahead and use it. So I realized this was supposed to be about the axes and the skulls, and all of a sudden we're starting to play around here with some other stuff, but that's kind of how that goes. I'm even going to try some of that here. I'm also contemplating some simplification here of a few of these shapes to make some of them a little bit more of a broad shape. It does mean maybe covering over a little bit of stuff that I've already done, but to me, that's well worth it. Well worth the trouble. All part of those adjustments that we make. I will grab a touch of the off-white here, and now you'll see That gives me a little different gray now. Might add a little touch of that, a little more of that yellow there to make sure it doesn't get too, I wouldn't say white, but too far off of, say, a warmer tone. And now these skulls start to fall in line more with what we did down towards the bottom. How much? Yes, I think on the teeth area, these guys, that's where I'll do some little bit of OSL on that. But here, can you see what's happening? I'm just gonna get some of that gray color in there. Something to, yeah, I think as I see the skulls here, that's kind of what gave me the idea to do this sort of a grayish tone here. So many warm colors all in one spot, I think. And who knows, maybe this is supposed to be bone here, so that also, I think it'll tie all of these different things together. Maybe this is some kind of carved bone right here. I suppose the more that I see it, the more it makes me think of that, so maybe that's what put that idea in my head. So maybe a little bit less of the glow up here, and maybe just, I don't want to say sky color, but I think you know where I'm going with that. Just letting the large surface of the brush play out here. Yeah. I'm starting to like that just a little bit better. Like I said, there's going to be a lot more stuff done there too. Then we'll go back into our skulls here. This can't be so light, just like the ones on the base. If these skulls get too light with this sort of color that I'm using right now, the problem I'm going to have is any sort of orange glow that I want on those skulls will have to be pretty darn extreme for it to show up at all. Yeah, see look at what that's, again, I know I talked about painting axes and skulls, and we're spending almost as much time on the armor, but when I feel like I've got a color or something like that just, as I do see, even there, look at that little bit of grayishness, I think that adds a lot. And I'm just gonna, for every time I get some of the white into this, well, the off-white, it's more of an ivory, I just toss a little bit of that yellow in there, just a touch of that yellow. It keeps it from getting too neutral. It still has just a touch of that yellow color. See, look at what that's doing. To me, it's not necessarily changing the light to dark value of it, but what it is doing, it's certainly giving me that color contrast, which is, we need some subtle contrasts in places here because, well, there's an awful lot of punchy in the face contrast here. And I mean, there's a lot of it. So any way to ramp that down is definitely a good one. Again, see, now I can, even here, maybe instead of it being all molten, maybe this is more of an ash type of a thing. I wish I had better, more precise words to give, more descriptors. I guess I'm just not up on my volcanic effects here. Maybe I need to study those some more. I'll get a few of these skulls back here. Although now they're just look at it this way, there'd be a little less to do now on the metal bits here on this character. This I'm just going to go back in with some darks and hit that too. Heck, I might even get a little bit of this grayish color on the trim that is facing up towards the de facto sky portion here. Now, what about... I'm liking this simplification a little bit more here, I think. Gonna go just a touch more with the lighter tone here. I'm almost trying to do a, I don't want to say wet into wet per se, but at least letting me push the paint around. Yeah, I think that was a good adjustment. That was worthwhile. And this, I will do some glazes over these little barbed chains as well, but for now, I just want to, that's me, make it a little note for myself. Just a little bit of a note. Okay. And every time I take a little bit of that white, I am just, it's a touch of yellow. It's really almost, I don't know, imperceptible, but in comparison, just kind of trading a 1-for-1. Again, I'm just gonna integrate some of that into the armor surfaces there, and see, now look at the difference that makes. Look at the transition that we get there. We really didn't have that much of a transit. We had some, if we had done the black and white, and maybe I'll do that here. I don't want to take up too much time, as much as I love making things black and white and checking them out. We had the value contrast. We had that. But to me, it did lack some of the color contrast. And by color contrast, I mean there wasn't enough of that cooler blue color. And I think it's really going to make a bit of a difference here too. Look at that. There we are. Up here as well. We're going to take some finer brushes and mess with it. Of course we will. But I don't want to say this is still a base coat in some ways, but it's still kind of borderline shaded base coat in some areas. It is smoothing some things out, though. There is definitely some refinement going on here, because these areas were definitely much rougher before, and I feel like they are here. As much as I liked a lot of the different little striations that I had, I felt like once the wings were there, it would just be, oh my gosh, it would be kind of just overbearing, overpowering, too much. Too much of a good thing is too much after all. We can still go way later here. I mean, we've got a long ways to go as far as adding more light. Here, I'm just gonna take that and push some of that around too. Okay, some of the skulls here now. The filbert shape of the brush really does work well for this process. It's not a dry brush. Getting a decent amount of art. Look at that. Yeah. But again, gotta be conscious of leaving myself enough, essentially enough space, value-wise, to go back in and. But there's already a decent amount of glow on the back there. That's still from the original airbrushing. I've actually been able to preserve a lot more of that than I thought I was going to be able to be honest. I thought most of that, and by most, I mean 70, 80, 90% of it was just going to be totally wiped away in the subsequent process. Able to save much more of it than I thought, which is nice. Again, these barbed chains, do what I can here with those, and then go back in later. Some of the yellow, some of the white. And now, to me, this, like in this, I might even, there might come a point where I take some of like the faded ultramarine or whatever and just pop in a few little purplish type things. It'll be it'll be subtle as always. It'll be definitely subtle, but I think it could, for the person that's really getting up close and looking at this thing, that might be a fun little color surprise to have in there. That would certainly be an episode 3 kind of a thing, or maybe even I might even do a post little epilogue thing or something like that where it's assembled. Because I have a feeling with as much stuff is going on with the wings and everything, maybe even some little post completion episode or post assembly episode might be called for. And there will definitely have to be pinning. There's going to be pins here, pins here. I'm going to have to do some green stuff beyond just gap filling, but also adding some additional strength to it as well. Gonna maybe switch to, well, let's see. Let's try the, we haven't used this brush in a while. Remember, it wasn't really working for drawing those little lines that we were trying to do, the sort of lava lines. I think here, though, is where it's going to do well. This tends to be the stuff that it really, yeah, see, it likes to do this. This is okay. It's just any sort of freehand stuff, and that's a very, I mean, broad term. Kind of like anything that remotely resembles freehand. Although, the other thing I noticed is this brush, to me, it likes the oils. I think it actually, well, that's it too. I think it likes the oils more than the acrylics. I think well, what do we always say? Water is thicker than oil, heavier than oil. And I think that is why you get sort of that ballooning effect here when the water hits it, whereas the oil and the white spirits, very different, very different. So, yeah, see, even here, the skulls almost, they kind of look like ash, almost like they've been a bit charred, which, hey, that to me is a big plus. I think that's also good. I think that could be very useful for us moving forward here. And I'd really like that simplification that's happening there too. Yeah, this it's the whole right tool, right purpose, and this particular brush just does well in this circumstance, or say with the oils. And you've seen what the the Cotmans will do, the blue handle Cotmans. Those really are, I have to say, they tend to be my favorite. Because they can take a little bit of a beating and they are not so expensive that, because they take a lot of abuse. They can take some abuse and still be useful even once they've been essentially beat up for more than this type of work. I still keep them around because, and I think you've seen me use some of the blue, especially the liner blue handle brush. You've seen me use that for some of the snow effects, for water effects, for places where I need a smaller brush. But do I really want to be getting glass particles in this particular brush? Do I really want to be getting heavy gloss gel in this brush stuck into it? I don't think so. I really don't think so. But I don't have to because I've got some other brushes. Look at this. See how that brush almost turned into a little bit of a filbert? It's like a tiny filbert brush there. Again, that's another positive element of what this brush can do. So what we're going to do now, we'll sort of continue with this in the next segment and then also try and do some of the armor stuff here, work more on these armor areas, do that the orange glaze that we were thinking about doing, remember, on some of our lava impressions. So we'll do all of those things in the next segment here. Now, I realize that I just started to incorporate an awful lot of this armor, way more so than even I thought I would, but yeah, look at that. See, to me, that makes a very big difference right there. I might let a few lighter highlights hit some of these skulls. And remember to, I'm essentially painting this in the dark, so I'm going to be coming back to this here. And there's some things that I can't reach. I've tried to reach them. They're impossible to see or reach on camera. So if I'm turning this thing around, you say, wait a minute, when did he paint that? It could very well have been just one of those things where it was impossible to get on screen, but or see. And as far as, I mean, myself. There we are. I think now I'm at about the limit as far as how much I want to lighten these skulls here. But even just by virtue of the dark neutral gray, mix in enough of the yellow with it so it didn't get too much of a bluish color. But to me, I think that really did help also on the armor. I'm just as happy about the things that happen with the armor as with anything on the skulls or the axes. But I think we've got the axes also. Think we're starting to figure out what's going on with these guys too. Like I said, more glazes are coming. Probably some wildwood glaze there because it would have some warmth to it. If I need it to be darker or, yeah, even darker or cooler, I'll just slip a little bit of Leviathan blue in there. I know we haven't really used that too much. These skulls here, see, their teeth are going to be not having so much of that lava glow. And if there's no lava glow there, well, why is that happening? So we're making that change over here too. So a lot of changes. I realize again that that's not really what I was supposed to be doing. And I put that in my invisible air quotes, supposed to be doing. But as you know, everything is always subject to change. There. Yeah. To me, that is definitely starting to read more as just your regular metal. So at this point here, it's going to be sort of a potpourri. I don't even I don't know what all areas I'm going to be hitting here. Could be just about anything and everything. So now that looks like more of the stuff that's pointed towards ground. Again, we will be smoothing these out, softening these up as much as possible. All right, so for sure, I promise I will do some of that darkening down. And what I mean by that is what happened up here. So we'll do that too. Then we'll get to that next. Let's go for a few of those glazes. And we'll keep that pretty simple here. We're going to just grab some of our orange. That's a little bit of the transparent red. A little bit of the transparent red. I'm going to chuck in a little bit of my yellow here too. That's the fluorescent yellow, by the way. I'm going to start over here. It's probably easier to see what's going on. This is not, again, it's not rocket science. You can see all we're doing. We're just going to do a little bit of a glaze here. But we're doing other glazes over here, and that's going to, see how that starts to soften some things? It's going to soften a lot of stuff. It's going to soften some of the areas here on the armor too. Look at what that just did right there. It's a little bit of subtle glazing in some places can really do some wonders. These are some of, if you're wondering, okay, so what are the things that he does when we can't see? A lot of it's just this. There's no extra details or anything like that. It's all it is me just going in and saying, you know what, I'd really like to chuck in something like that. It's really that simple. There's maybe, well, it would be really hard to do because again, the between the lights and everything else, it doesn't really show that. But I'd almost just like to do an episode of something like that. These super subtle final effect things here that just like this, that is again just a glaze. And why is all of a sudden this orange appearing here? Because I'm thinking the wings. The wings are, look at what that does now. Look at what that just did. It's just a tiniest hint of a glaze. That is all that is. It's nothing more than that. Now up here, remember we said we wanted to really tone some of this down. So we will. And if need be, if I feel like it, I can go back in with some of these darks there. But look at what that does. See now it looks a little bit more like what's on the inside of the arm. I always say it over and over again, but half the time you have to be willing to say, boy, okay, I know that doesn't look like exactly what I'd like it to right now, but I know that's what I need it to be for now, and then later it's going to be something different. So look what we just did there again. So now those show up, it's almost like we're shading it down into the kind of the crevices there. So I'm gonna take some of the orange, some of the yellow here. And here, as you can see, the glaze almost gets to be a bit of a lighter glaze. Constantly thinking, what's going to smooth these like here? Okay, we got a whole bunch of stuff going on here. It seems a little bit on the rougher side. So what about just a little unifying glaze? Oh, maybe that's a good term. Unifying glazes. Actually, I think I used to use that term maybe back in the days of the painting pyramid. I think I don't quote me on that. But that could be the case. I might have actually called those unifying glazes back in the day. It's a fairly simple idea. See it like that? That was too yellow. Maybe it's a little bit too much on the gray side. Here we'll tone down a little bit of the yellow glow. Because if it's yellow, if it's yellow everywhere, it'll never have that true brightness that we're looking for. So just by taking it down a little bit, the fluorescent paints are transparent enough that you can get those subtle. Look at that little extra right there. To me, makes all the difference in the world. Here, there was not much going on. Look at these things; they're just kind of yellow. All of a sudden, now there's a little more. Look at this. We're gonna knock these down here just like we did in other areas. Those certainly don't need to be that bright, and even this stuff here doesn't need to be that intense. Look at it, see? It's essentially, that dry glaze. Is this watery? No, this is essentially straight up fluorescent paint. There is no water added to this. It's just the fluorescent paint. This is what makes it so potentially more powerful than, say, something along the lines of the much thicker, oh, what is that stuff, of the Vallejo version. As much as I did like that, the ability for this to be thin and yet still cover and have that kind of impact that I want, that's really invaluable. Now that just, see, that got too yellow right there. Gonna go right back over to the orange and we'll knock that down a bit. So that's starting to look more like it's got some heat working on it. I'm stirking this down a touch more now again. As some of this stuff here, like on her leg, to be honest, I'm gonna have to wait for the final determination on that when this actually gets put on the base. And I wish I could sort of make that determination now. It would be a whole lot easier as far as me getting that brush down in there. Unfortunately, I have to see one next to the other. So there could be a bit of there could be some interesting opinions being proffered there as I try and squeeze a brush into an area that the brush has no business being in, just because of, well, what I just described. Some non-YouTube friendly metaphors. That's what we always call those. Once again, back to some orange here, toning this down, and again another glaze over here. It just starts to mesh those two together. This also got pretty yellow, and just knocking it down towards the orange. That is really the easiest thing to do with any sort of object source lighting, whatever it is you want to call it with this. The easiest thing you can do is by far use the orange to make it lighter than you need it to be. Then take the orange and hit it with those glazes. You can see what it does. I mean, you can see with your own eyes. You don't really need me to tell you. And then look what's going to happen here. I promised you some stuff on the skulls, right? I promised you. Well, this is essentially what I did with the skulls on the base. See that little bit of a glaze there? Look at how that line went from a sharp line to one that's faded by virtue of this little glaze. And because it's and yes, I will continue to refer to it as a dry glaze, because it's a dry glaze, it didn't go down into the crevices there and affect those in a way that I didn't want. Oh my goodness, can you even... I think you can see this. Barely, but I think you can see it. We're doing the same thing here. You might be able to see it on these two. And taking that sort of a dirtied up orange. There's a little bit of red tossed in there, but look at that. See how it's... I guess the nearest equivalent, it's sort of like the oil. The oils where we take that second brush and we just sort of blend things away. See, look at that. We just did some light there on the facial part of the skull. We're going to get some little bit of underneath lighting here on some of these skulls like we talked about. And just sticking with the orange and the yellow. Continuing with these dry glazes. See that? It's easier to get it lighter first. And where you've got areas that you can see a brushstroke, it is easier just to wipe those away. Here we go. We've got another area here. Let's see what happens with that same principle, that same idea of a dry glaze in here. We'll hit some of... let's get this... let's get a couple of these skulls here with some more of that glaze. Carry the orange out a little further, maybe. Oh, spin this around and look at what happens here. See how that starts to smooth out? It's transparent enough, but yet opaque enough to make that difference there. See, now that gets to be a little bit more of a subtle deal there. Let's go to the other side here and do a similar thing. Toning things down. You could practically start out almost like with a white and then just do glazing over this. There's been a few times where I was thinking of actually doing a tutorial that was a little bit like that, where you're just doing more glazing of this. Then sometimes we do a lot of painting of this effect on there. Look at see how that just ratcheting it down a bit. Not quite as many little lines in there. Starting to smooth out a bit, and you'll see a lot of this on the wings. There's going to be an awful lot. This is a really good, I guess, preview for what will happen on those wings. I think it's a really good preview because as you can see what this does when you sort of go lighter than you need to do, especially with the glowy type stuff, and then you work it back the other way, which is what we're doing now. As if I throw a little bit of the fluorescent yellow in there. So now much smoother things happening here. Little less with all those different crazy shapes that you saw. And I know for some folks they were really just wondering what's up with all that? What is going on? Back to our yellow. Mix that in with the orange. Maybe even a little shot of that right here. Let's do some of that over here. So I know I said darker glazes, but I like that term unifying glaze. That you're probably going to hear that more and more, I think. I like the concept of that. And look at that right there. Remember how there was a whole bunch of different shapes initially, and we've consolidated those? You see how I've added now a little bit of the fluorescent yellow to that, so it would. Again, it was not meant to just be this sort of, I don't want to say dead gray or dead warm gray by comparison to this, but I see there's some subtle bits of the yellow in there. Work some of this onto armor here. Under there, so that's an area that's a little tough to get to, a little tough to see. What about here? We still have to knock some of these down. Again, trying to think of some unifying glazes there. But I am going to go back in with the mahogany here. And hey, this still qualifies as darker glazes. Giraffe spots. That's, I was like, why do I recognize some of these? It's a little bit like giraffe spots in some places. I don't want it to look too much like that. We obviously are looking more for molten lava effect than, say, giraffe spots. But I'm going to just try and get some darker spots in here. Maybe even like that. I'm just going to turn that into one larger spot. Just making those adjustments on the fly like you do. See, now that that's been toned down, I go back into it with the darker color. And then you can see how it sort of hides that little bit of orange residue that you get when you do those glazes. Like over here, we'll show you here on the elbow. That's really gonna stand out, I think. Yeah, see how that stands out. We also will do a little bit more of that over here, and you can see once again how it sort of covers over the orange residue of the glaze. That's why I was not worried about it, because I knew I was going to go over the top of it with these. And see, now that, oh, now you can really see it. You can really see that. Yeah, and I'm going to use, I'm going to go with a smaller brush. This is going to be your Quad Zero. Yeah. All right. And remember, I could still go darker than this. I could still get the wildwood out here. There's no black anywhere on this. Absolutely nowhere is there black. It might look like it just because of how bright we've gotten everything else, but no, there's no black there. And I'm thinking about having this, oh, see, like right here? Right there, yeah. Nice open area. I think that really helps. Going to continue with the bringing this darker stuff down here. I just something tells me that it needs to be carried further down here. Just consolidate some of these, make some of them. And if I want it to be a little lighter, well, that's a bit of the burnt sienna now, so they can still be darker, but yet not too much. Here too. And this one, I'm gonna do another little consolidation here. Consolidate that here. Okay, I think you can see that these must be darker here because I want this to have something to contrast with. So I'm just going to get these dark. I know it's really tough for you to see, and I apologize for that, but I keep forgetting about these because it's sort of the out of sight, out of mind factor here. But look at that. Big difference already made. Big difference there. Remember, you cannot be held hostage or prisoner by that original plan. It's all too easy for that to happen. You have to just fight against that. No better way I can put it. Just don't let here. I'm just gonna one big shape. Simplify. When in doubt, simplify. I think that's when in doubt, simplify. That's gonna have to be yet another chapter in the Book of Wapple. Yeah, we need to do that. We need to get that in there. Boy, that's two already. One per episode here in this little series. That's not bad. When in doubt, simplify. It's simple, easy to remember. Let's get some of our burnt sienna here, and boy, look how dark. I did not expect that to be quite so dark, so we're gonna grab some. And that even that is still, I don't want to say it's too dark, but even that looks dark. But I'm just doing a comparison there. Also, trying to think about, crazy as it is, there's also the object source light. There's the interior lighting, but then there's also the exterior lighting that I've got to think about and what sort of effect that's going to have on this area. So I'm just going to let that get, there's that sort of glaze there again. When in doubt, always simplify. Let's get that all the way down to the, yeah. You know what? Simplify. We're simplifying. All of a sudden, these guys, real easy to see those. Very easy. Do I maybe lose a little bit of the glow? Maybe. But I think that's a worthy trade. I do think that's not a shabby trade at all. I can live with that trade. Okay. So I think that was very productive there as far as darkening that down. So I still have to determine this. I'm going to take some of the burnt sienna and some of this, and I'm just going to dust this over the top here. I know there's a whole bunch of texture on this. Is that texture enough? Do I think this texture is in it? Now here I can't do that quite so much because it's being also lit from beneath. Just do a bit there, and now a little bit of orange here just to, again, show that it's being maybe affected from the lighting from below. I'm gonna go darker out here. I might even, yeah, okay. That's, yeah, let's do that. Let's go with that. I'm gonna take some of this gray here, and this is the last couple of brush strokes here. A little bit of that gray. So now that looks a little bit more like ash there. See how you got that cooler look to it now? Okay. What we'll do is I think we're actually gonna, believe it or not, we're gonna glue that head on there and see how this all sort of unifies together, and then we'll do some final little details. We're just trying to do more of these unifying type things. Okay, and we're gonna do that next. So here's a little something I thought you guys could benefit from. Now this head, it just doesn't want to, no matter which way I put this thing, it doesn't want to sit in there solidly. It'll just, if I try and put glue on there, see where the paint is being scraped away? Now I could try and file that away or do whatever. It's just not fitting very well. I like to do something called glue green stuff glue. So there's some green stuff. Here's some glue, and the idea is we get some glue in here. We get our green stuff in there, and I'm just going to put this much in. So I've got some extra here. And now I'm going to just, there's a little bit of water there, flatten that out a little bit. So now here's my glue. And now, I'm going to actually get some of that. Here, I'm going to grab me a piece of paper towel here. Take away some of the excess glue. And then we're going to drop this in here. And the idea is all of the unevenness there, that is filled in by the green stuff. You'll never know it's there. If there is a little bit of a tiny bit of that showing, I'll just paint it. So there is your head attached. Now I'm going to have to be sort of on the careful side not to snap that off, but now I'm just going to keep this here so I can do something like that. What do you do with leftover green stuff? Well, you could just roll it out. Remember the coins that I made? But here is something that I sometimes will do. So we're just going to do something like this. And then we'll just make a very sort of generic kind of a snake head here. And then you do something like a wet down a blister pack or whatever. I think I've sort of got one here. And then we just sort of coil it up like that. So just to make sure we've got that head at the right angle there. So you've got yourself sort of a semi-coiled snake there that you can throw on, I don't know, something like this, some kind of a jungle tomb base or jungle ruins base or something like that. So that's what you do with your extra green stuff. Hopefully that is just a handy little thing. I also wanted to let that glue have just a few minutes to set up there before I started to fool around with it again. Let's just try and do some smaller scale things here. Maybe, wow, this is, now I also have mentioned what the fans are doing to dry all this out. Now, tomorrow there is a new device that is coming that will hopefully cool things down in here, but at the same time, and this sounds crazy in the middle of a humid summer, but actually humidify the room a little bit. I know that really sounds crazy, but it's actually, I might even do, I don't want to say a video on it necessarily, but I don't know. You might even see it in the video. It depends on how well it works. Let's see. I'm just getting a few little teats on here. This is going to get a little more definition on it now. I'm basically sticking here because I know I'm not going to be moving this around and then essentially not snapping the head off, but remember, it's sitting on a bed of green stuff right now. And that green stuff will move. You say, what's the idea with the glue, green stuff, glue? Well, one of the things that happens because, well, there's moisture in the green stuff. What happens with water and super glue? They sort of crystallize a little bit. And I'm sort of counting on a bit of that crystallization to not just make that dry faster. It's water can sometimes be an accelerant for super glue. So yeah, it makes it dry a little faster, but the idea, or set up a little faster. The other idea is that the green stuff is not then soft anymore. It becomes more hard and crystallized. Basically, when you just can't get a pin somewhere, which is going to be most places on creature caster figures, and by most I mean 99.999% of them, that's been invaluable for me. I know that. That has really been helpful. And I thought I would just stick with this area here, I think, as far as trying to get some smoother things, some subtle things. I'll even throw a few little effects maybe there on some of the skulls. This could certainly use maybe some more color besides just the reds. We've got her shoulder over here. That could certainly use some lights here. Like so. Just to see a little line of those right there. It's fluorescent yellow, some of our white. And start to think, okay, how light is light for these metal highlights? Where do we need to go? What would maybe be too much? Let's see here. Let's get a little more of the yellow into this, and this the face right here. This is what I'm targeting right now. We haven't really done a whole lot with this. I don't know, maybe there's a part of me that really wanted to see what the head was going to look like there. And I think now that I've got that sitting there, I've got a better idea. Get a couple of these little teeth here. More of the white and the fluorescent yellow. Like this. And maybe on some of these armor parts, instead of it being the, what should we call it, the reflected, more yellow or the orange glow. Let's go the other way here. Let's get a little bit of gray into this, because remember, that is supposed to be armor. Yeah, some subtle hints of the gray, I think, is important there. And it's a weird gray. I'm essentially mixing the fluorescent yellow in with that gray, that neutral gray. But that we also have the axis here. We have a bazillion light sources. So if there would be a reason for an orange glow to be hitting just about every single part of this thing, we almost have to say, you know what, not here. It could go here, but not here. Point, I've already forgotten that little saying that I just that I did in the last segment there. I'm gonna just go over here, like right where the white is. I knew I should have written that down. But some of these guys, let's hit these. Okay. That starts to, yeah. Now on the flip side, I'm going to take some of the mahogany here. Whoops, I almost stuck my finger on the ear to use that as a brace. That probably wouldn't have done too much that was noticeable. It might have just knocked it off kilter a little bit, but glad that I caught that. Definitely glad that I caught that before I put too much pressure on it. That wouldn't have been very fun. Don't think I would have been terribly happy about that. And there on the bottom, just a little something there for the orange. These might be totally blocked by the axe blade to you. I keep forgetting about those. All they are is just little rivets, nothing special. Once again, we will do a little bit of our back and forth here. And I think I want to get some orange to those places too. A little more of that maybe on some of the skulls. Oh, I'll just take a little bit more of my lighter tone here. Some of these metals. Are you asking me, is that gold or steel or whatever? Who knows? At this point, I'm not sure I know. I'm not sure it really even matters, because when you got that much of a glow on everything, I think it would just sort of distort. I mean, you can try and do the whole bronze, brassy look too. I mean, it does sit you a dark or grayed down backdrop than say something like the steel, which would be more of a cooler tone and have obviously some more bluish grays in it. Now I'm just basically replacing some of the orange glow here now with just some white, almost like that's more of an ambient light that's hitting that right there. It just seems to make a little more sense right now. Okay, we'll get a couple more of our, certainly some more lights down here. So I'm gonna scrape, I'll wipe some of it away. And a lot of this I might have to change it all again when I see it, where it's going to hit some of those plumes of the lava slash magma. So I'm just going to not do that right now. I have no idea if I'll be able to fit that on screen for you once that is assembled. Obviously, I'll put this on the base first and do that. So that's, yeah, it'll just be kind of a supplemental episode there. Call it an episode 3.5. An epilogue, I guess, where I'll kind of show you what it's like assembled, and then, well, obviously, I think what I'm going to try and do in the third episode and final episode for real is really focus on the wings and then put this on the base and then try and do some, well, who knows, unifying glazes, unifying washes, unifying whatevers that are going to have to be done. So, but just look at that. The skulls, bringing those out. Oh, let's just do a little bit right here, because obviously there is no way any of this stuff is just viable if it's stuck to that base. It's certainly not viable if the wings are attached to it. Even if I was doing oils, as much as I'm not a sub-assembly person, and the reason I love oils is to not have to do sub-assemblies as much, there are times there are times in miniature painting where you just have to accept the sub-assembly. It's sad but true. And when it comes to these type of figures, well, very seldom can you escape the sub-assembly. So look what that does down there. That's all of these little things. You know, why would I, in the last episode or even at the beginning of this one, why would I really worry about this stuff so much when we hadn't even painted any of the skulls yet? We hadn't done any of the skin effect. That's just, it's, I don't want to say a waste of resources or whatever, but it's not an ideal use of resources. How's that? There are better ways to allocate your painting resources. So again, just gonna do some of those. Gonna get rid of that yellow there. It was intriguing, but it's not really giving me much for as far as describing shapes or whatever, so that goes away. So we just integrated that almost like it was a bit of an oil do thingy right there. Now this, I just realized, it's probably going to be covered by the wings. I'm just realizing that now. Actually, where the heck do the wings go? Might be good to just see, it's been so long. Where the heck do these wings actually... Oh, well, that's interesting. Never mind. So all this stuff that we've been painting here, we're just going to have to file that away. Yes, because that goes right there. Completely... Right, we're definitely going to need some glue, green stuff glue back here. Wow, for sure. Yeah, to keep that thing stable. So, okay, there was a whole bunch of stuff we didn't need to paint. That is funny. Wow. I was, it just, looked like an armor shape. So we're going to be filing that away so that the glue actually sticks there. And yeah, see, we always learn something new. New things. It's always time to learn something new. Oh, there's another one. My goodness. How many of these are there going to be? How many of these will there be? My goodness. Ah, there we go. See, I just knocked that down a little more. The red. Again, I've got this in place now. And even with this, I'm seeing that maybe I tone those down even a little bit more. Maybe even some of this gets toned down a bit more. At a certain point, you really do get into the mode of much more delicate. So, see how we've got a lot more happening there on her arm. I'm going to I'm gonna see if I can just look into. No, that's too much. That's better. Yeah, it's weird. I couldn't really see it. I just couldn't tell when it was just, well, a head sitting in my hand, or even when it was sort of blue tacked on there. Couldn't see it, but then seeing it next to everything else, it was as plain as day. Just like, oh, I don't know, certain things where what I thought was armor was a wing, or was a mount for the freaking wings. So yeah, let that be a lesson to you. But that's starting to look like it's on fire. So we're having some success. We're maybe being stupid in some areas, but maybe we're not entirely stupid. I will get a little more of my orange. Yeah, there we go. Just seeing that head over there. See, I'm starting to realize. Okay, some of those little things that I did over here, these striations that now I see they did make some sense. It's not like I'm bringing them completely back. It's a very subtle, just like there, and not much else. Because hey, the wings are going to be right there. We know that now. Good grief. My goodness. So yeah, that's I'll just take my files and do maybe some of my wood carving tools and just carve that away. Uh, After this has been dry, though, because believe me, there have been times where I've gone in and forgot about, oh, I just glued the head on there. I just was so obsessed about some other thing. Next thing you know, that the head's laying here on the table here, making me not super happy. That's a little bit of my burnt sienna there. I just need to do some more simplification here. There's too many small shapes. Gotta make them bigger. Too many dots. I need shapes, not dots. That's gonna be larger too. Man, I think that now makes a bit more sense. So, okay, everybody, thanks again. I appreciate all the support. I really do. Hopefully, that was entertaining, if not disturbing, with the whole not realizing that wasn't armor, but actually a mount for where the wings go. But speaking of wings, that's what we're going to hit next. We will do that. Really spend a lot of time in episode 3. Then we will attach her to the base and see what sort of corrections need to be made there. and then we'll try and do whatever unifying things we need to do to tie it together. But thanks again, everybody, and I'll catch you on the third episode of the Queen of Onslaught.